Welcome back, and welcome to this little space I created inside my head. Some of the highlights of my collection are scattered around here. Sometimes it feels like I'm being watched. But you know, it could be worse. Only thing worse is that thing living over there. Now, I know, of all the random roster transactions made by the Royals, this is a weird one to lose sleep over. Yes, Gregor Blanco is a cult hero in San Francisco, preserving a perfect game in his first season as a Giant, and winning the World Series in 2012 and 2014, but he was never more than a fourth outfielder that could start in a pinch. Only twice did he start more than 100 games in a season, and one of those years was a less than impressive rookie year in Atlanta. Plus, it was not like he was much of a prospect to begin with. So, why Gregor Blanco? Well, ironically, the issue is not really to do with Blanco himself. I mean, it kind of is, but more to do with the circumstances behind why Kansas City dumped him despite his early success in Kansas City, and Kansas City's failure to capitalize on his replacements when they somehow had a chance to. To start, we talk not about Gregor Blanco, but about the 2009 Kansas City Royals, specifically their outfield. Entering the new decade, it was clear the outfield was going to be a problem. For 2009, David DeJesus was the only player to start more than 100 games in the outfield, regardless of which side. In fact, he and Mitch Maier were the only players to receive more than 70 starts. Opening day center fielder Coco Crisp struggled with injuries throughout the year and would leave in free agency after the season. Opening day right fielder Jose Guillen turned into such a defensive liability, the Royals were forced to use him exclusively at DH. For the record, this same team also employed Billy Butler and Mike Jacobs and would later trade for Yuniesky Betancourt. Yes, Guillen had one more year on his contract, but for 2010 he was viewed as a designated hitter only. The Royals needed a couple short-term options to open the 2010 season in the outfield, and they did exactly that, signing Rick Ankiel and Scott Podsednik to one-year deals. Each would start on opening day. There was a very realistic chance all three opening day outfielders would get traded by the deadline, so hopefully the team's best outfield prospects would be major league ready by then, right? About that. The long-term outlook in the outfield was not good, and the future at the position was bleak at best. While David DeJesus had a couple years of control remaining, he was the subject of perpetual trade rumors, and it seemed like a guarantee that he would not be a Royal after 2011. The team had just drafted a catcher named Will Myers, and while he was viewed as an outfielder long-term, he was years away from the majors. Beyond him, the two best outfield prospects entering 2010 was David Lowe in 10th and Jordan Perez in 19th. Perez was the player to be named when the Royals shipped a recently designated Tyler Lumsden to Houston after the 2008 season. That was their second best outfield prospect. The Royals were well aware of this. Early in the season, they sent a struggling hitter named Alex Gordon to Omaha to learn how to play left field. We all know how this move worked out, but at the time, Gordon had zero outfield experience and was largely switching positions due to the emergence of Mike Moustakas in the minors. Even if the move worked out defensively, there were still questions on whether Gordon would be the hitter everyone thought he would be. He would get his chance back in the majors a week before the trade deadline, as the corresponding roster move after David DeJesus suffered a season-ending injury to his thumb. This happened after the Royals had trade talks with multiple teams, including some trades that could have sent an outfielder back to the Royals. You know, if I had $1 for every time the Royals waited too long to trade someone. Over the following week, the Royals will make a few more trades, notably trading away their other opening day outfielders, Scott Podsednik and Rick Ankiel. The Ankiel trade is where we circle back to Gregor Blanco, as he was acquired in that trade. You know, this trade looks a lot better on paper than it did in reality for the Royals. I talked about the Jesse Chavez part in the prior video. At the time, he was the least valuable player in the trade, and was downright awful for the Royals. It's still crazy to think he turned into arguably the best player in that trade. As for Blanco, he would replace Rick Ankiel as the team's center fielder. After the deadline, the Royals will move forward with an outfield consisting of Alex Gordon in left, Blanco in center, and Mitch Maier in right. Gregor Blanco got to play next to a literal Royals legend. But enough about Mitch Maier, this video is not about him. A week after the trade, he told the Kansas City Stars' Bob Dutton that he was thrilled to play every day and even viewed the trade as great news due to the lack of playing time with the Braves. It was clear he was excited to be a Royal, and he made the most of the opportunity. Over 49 games, 44 of them starts, Blanco hit a respectable .274, .348, .369, and while the bat was simply average, his speed and defense was more than enough to carry him to success. Plus, it helped that he always had good play discipline and was not afraid to take a walk. While Blanco would be the primary center fielder for the remainder of the season, the Royals promoted a young rookie named Jarrod Dyson to split some starts after rosters expanded. To be honest, he was primarily promoted for his speed. He's a great story, former 50th round draft pick that grinded his way to the majors, playing parts of 12 major league seasons mostly with the Royals. Back in 2010 though, no one ever thought his bat would be good enough to stick around. Baseball Prospectus went as far as comparing him to Herb Washington, a world-class sprinter who played exclusively as a pinch runner in the 1970s, appearing in 105 games without taking an at-bat or playing in the field. For the record, Terrence Gore will not be drafted until 2011, but Dyson in 2010 barely had a higher ceiling than Gore ever did. My point, Dyson was never really viewed as a serious competitor to Gregor Blanco, at least not right away. Entering the offseason, the Royals had a projected outfield of Alex Gordon in left field, Gregor Blanco in center, and a returning David DeJesus in right. Mitch Meyer and Jarrod Dyson were the likely backups on the bench. For a rebuilding team, that's honestly an acceptable outfield. Gordon and Blanco would get a chance to prove they belonged in the Royals' future plans, and DeJesus, in his final year with the Royals, would get a chance to reclaim some of his value before possibly getting traded in July. Of course, this is the Royals, and the rational move is almost never taken. Literally at the beginning of the offseason, the Royals dumped David DeJesus off to Oakland for pitchers Finn Mazzaro and Justin Marks. I'll save the full rundown for a future video. All you need to know today is that Mazzaro was garbage, and the Justin Marks the Royals received is the third most important Justin Marks on Wikipedia. Before DeJesus got hurt, the Royals were seeking a big return and appeared willing to hold on to DeJesus if their terms were not met. Instead, they offloaded him at the beginning of the offseason for a return that was viewed as light, even at the time. Were the Royals that worried over a thumb injury? Wouldn't it make more sense to gamble on DeJesus regaining his value at the deadline? Regardless, the Royals now needed a right fielder, and luckily for GM Data Moore, two different players that he coveted became available. To start the offseason, both Jeff Francoeur and Melky Cabrera were non-tendered by their respective teams. Both were still relatively young. Francoeur was 27 and Melky would turn 27 in August. Both had previously failed to live up to high expectations. Both made their major league debut on July 7, 2005. Seriously, I cannot make that up. And Dayton had a connection to both players. Dayton was close to Francoeur when he worked in the Braves front office, and the feeling across baseball was that the two working together was not a matter of if, but when. As for Melky, the Royals had previously tried to trade for him, which I discussed in a couple prior videos. They had a trade in place to acquire him for Reggie Sanders back in 2006, however, an injury to Sanders nixed the deal. My first video on the subject? Yeah, let's just say I did not venture deep enough in the Wayback Machine and concluded the wrong player was almost traded for Melky. It's still up because the Yankees getting Devin Cavich made a lot more sense than getting Reggie Sanders, but that's getting off topic. So the Royals needed someone cheap to cover right field after trading David DeJesus, and two intriguing options appeared on the market at the same time. Both were promised everyday at-bats, something the other teams could not guarantee. The Royals would end up signing Jeff Francoeur to take over right field, which, considering the connection between him and Dayton Moore, made sense. It was a one-year prove-it deal with a mutual option, Dayton Moore's favorite type of option. This seemed to leave Melky with one less suitor. Yes, he had recently played center field, but his defense was lacking and a move to one of the corners seemed necessary. Plus, the Royals already had Gregor Blanco at the position. You know what they did 2 days later? They signed him anyways and guaranteed him the center field job. This was also a one-year deal, but he had a second year of club control through arbitration that was essentially a free team option if you played well. I promise I'll come back to that point. Now, the Royals have a projected outfield of Alex Gordon, Melky Cabrera, and Jeff Francoeur, with Gregor Blanco appearing to be the fourth outfielder. This was not the end of the world, but it still sucked to see someone that looked well down the stretch get relegated thanks to a couple bounce-back candidates. To add insult to injury, later in the month the Royals would trade Zach Greinke to the Brewers, with Lorenzo Cain among those heading back to Kansas City. You know, Lorenzo Cain and Gregor Blanco could coexist on the Royals. True, Cain was primarily a center fielder like Blanco, but both could play the corners with ease. It helped Blanco that Cain was never really considered for the Major League roster for 2011, but the Royals were very high on him and hoping he'd be ready to start in 2012. So the Royals entered spring training with their opening day outfield pretty much secured. Gordo, Melky, and Frenchie, with Blanco, Mitch Meyer, Jarrod Dyson, and Lorenzo Cain competing for bench spots. Of the four bench options, Blanco and Meyer were out of options, and it would take an injury or a massive spring performance for Low Cain to be considered. The Royals had room for 5 outfielders, so it seemed like Blanco was a lock. Unfortunately, a big spring from Jarrod Dyson was enough for him to join Mitch Meyer on the bench, not Blanco. The Royals designated him for assignments and outrighted him to Omaha. The Nationals would later trade for him, but he would not appear in the majors for 2011. Now, this should be the end of the story, but I am not ready to end it. First, I want to discuss the decision to keep Jarrod Dyson over Gregor Blanco. The main reasoning for the decision, according to manager Ned Yost, was Dyson's speed. I understand Jarrod Dyson is among the fastest players to ever play baseball, but that's not to say Gregor Blanco is slow. If Jarrod Dyson is a Bugatti Veyron, then Gregor Blanco is a Ferrari. If Jarrod Dyson is a cheetah, then Gregor Blanco is a... pronghorn? The hell is a pronghorn? Yeah, sure, that thing. You know what made this decision more confusing? Jarrod Dyson was optioned in May, 11 days after Blanco was traded to the Nationals. He briefly came back up at the end of June, but was sent back to Omaha until later in September. If there never was a long-term plan with Dyson, at least in 2011, why not just keep Blanco around? Maybe he learns a thing or two from the veterans ahead of him, and at least he gets a chance in the majors before possibly getting cut. The other bench outfielder the Royals kept was Mitch Maier. Now, full disclaimer, I am the unofficial president of the Mitch Maier fan club. I am well aware that Mitch Maier is the greatest Royal to ever Royal, trademark. The greatest to ever wear the powder blues. The best two-way player in Royals history with a clean 0.00 ERA. But even I can admit Mitch was a known commodity by 2011. He was a decent fourth outfielder that wasn't really bad at anything, but he wasn't really good either. To be fair, his 94 OPS plus in 2010 was right behind Gregor Blanco's 97 OPS plus as a Royal, and the defense was similar between the two, but Maier was never a fast runner. After the 2010 season, Maier had 12 career stolen bases over 283 career games. Blanco stole 10 bases over his 49 games as a Royal. If speed was important, why pick Maier over Blanco? The Royals knew what they had with Mitch Maier, why not see what Gregor Blanco had to offer? Now, I'm sure you're probably wondering how Melky Cabrera and Jeff Francoeur did, as their signings were what forced Gregor Blanco out of a starting role to begin with. Believe it or not, both players were solid. On top of that, David DeJesus was struggling in Oakland. Data Moore's big-brained 4D chess move somehow worked. Despite that, the Royals found themselves at 46 and 62 on the day of the trade deadline. Once again, sellers. There was trade interest in both players, and with Frenchie set to become a free agent, it made sense to trade him at least. I mean, the Royals still needed an outfielder for 2012, and Melky still had that second year of control. Naturally, keeping Melky over Frenchie seemed logical. Well, here's the problem. The Royals wanted to extend Francoeur, and even Frenchie himself publicly said he wanted to stay in Kansas City. So instead of selling high on one of the reclamation projects, the Royals kept both players, and halfway into August they signed Jeff Francoeur to a 2-year, $13.5 million extension. This killed any leverage the Royals had in an off-season Melky trade, as they still viewed Lorenzo Cain as the 2012 center fielder, and Billy Butler was moved to designated hitter when Eric Hosmer was promoted. Melky had nowhere to play. By extending Jeff Francoeur, they also sunk Melky's trade value. Why not just trade Melky at the deadline? Instead, they'd have to wait until the offseason. It may not surprise you to learn the Royals did trade Melky, and like with David DeJesus a year prior, they traded him at the very beginning of the offseason. They sent him to the San Francisco Giants for pitchers Jonathan Sanchez and Ryan Verdugo, with Sanchez being the highlight. In 2010, he struck out over 200 batters and had the lowest hit per 9 innings rate in baseball, and was a perfectly serviceable pitcher despite a high walk rate. In 2011, however, he struggled with injuries and saw his already high walk rate balloon even higher. Some sources even viewed him as a non-tender candidate. If the Royals were acquiring 2010 Jonathan Sanchez, I'd call it a perfectly fair return, but they were acquiring a reclamation project, and even worse, they paid full price for a buy low, non-tender candidate. Were the offers at the trade deadline that bad? Surely they could have done better. What makes this even worse is looking at Melky and Frenchie's 2012 seasons. Melky would have a career year with the Giants, which included starting the All-Star Game and winning All-Star Game MVP, ironically hosted by the Kansas City Royals. Yes, he had a little help, but at the time of the suspension, he led the league in hits and was second in batting average. Jeff Francoeur, on the other hand, was the worst player in baseball. I'm not exaggerating, he literally had the worst WAR in baseball for 2012. The Royals had a choice between Melky and Frenchie, and instead of keeping Melky when he was already under club control for 2012, they extended the other guy instead because of the power of friendship. Oh, this suspension happened in August. Imagine the haul the Royals could have got for a juiced up, roided out Melky at the 2012 trade deadline. And I haven't even mentioned how damn awful Jonathan Sanchez was with the Royals. You know, this video is supposed to be about Gregor Blanco, but I wanted to show how badly the Royals fumbled this. They made a questionable decision to dump Gregor Blanco and sell David de Jesus low. They somehow saw the decision pay off on the field, but in the end all the Royals got out of that was the worst starting pitcher in baseball and the worst position player in baseball. Okay, fine. They did flip Sanchez for Jeremy Guthrie, but my point still stands. Back to Gregor Blanco. For 2012, he would join Melky in San Francisco on a minor league deal, a city he would call home for 6 of the following 7 years. Ultimately, the Royals did not need Blanco, but that does not make the move any less puzzling. When the Giants faced the Royals in the 2014 World Series, Blanco recalled watching the Royals' 2011 opening day game from the left field seats, somewhere in front of the Royals Hall of Fame. He played in the Futures game earlier and hit an inside-the-park home run, yet his core memory was watching from the stands when he felt he should have been in the dugout. He was baffled and saddened by the decision, and do you blame him? He did everything right to conclude the 2010 season, yet he still lost his job to players that played worse than him. I'm including a link to the story in the video's description, as it's really good and gives a deeper look into how all this motivated Blanco. Even thinking back to 2010 personally, I was impressed by Blanco, and truly felt he brought a spark to the Royals before their major prospects were ready. The Royals seemingly gave up on him for no reason, and gave him the motivation to become a cult hero across the country. If you're new here and want to see more videos like this, then feel free to like, subscribe, and even share this video. This is not my first time talking about the 2010 Royals. Besides the previously mentioned Jesse Chavez, I highlighted Brian Bullington's magical two-hitter that he tossed against the defending champion New York Yankees. It might honestly be the best moment for the 2010 Royals. I'm here to talk about the history of the Royals, but specifically those moments. Kyle Davies, Ken Harvey, the Tony Pena opening day coin flip, that time they almost traded Ian Kennedy for a legitimate prospect. There's even a Dusty Coleman video if you really want pain. I mean, someone has to do all this. If all that interests you, then you're invited to stick around. Until next time.
Gregor Blanco launches it to deep right field and makes it a one-run game. Wow, into the second tier. That was a big boy home run. That was not a wall scraper at all.
I got to say, where did that come from? That was really totally out of you. You don't think about that when Blanco goes to the plate. Here he rounds first base watching the ball.